The beach house was never just a house. It was the sound of gulls before sunrise. The smell of salt and coffee drifting through open windows. The creak of the third porch step that never got fixed because we liked knowing someone was coming. I bought it in 1974 with money I earned teaching school and money my mother left me when she passed. Harold wanted no part of it. He said the drive was too far, the winters too damp. So the deed went in my name alone. Margaret Elaine Dawson, spinster, the bank man wrote, because I was not yet married. I laughed when he said it. I was 33. I did not feel like any man's spinster. My children learned to walk on that sandy floor. Thomas took his first steps chasing a beach ball that rolled toward the dunes. Our daughter, Ruthie, only lived to be 7, but every photograph of her smiling was taken on that porch with the ocean behind her like a promise. After Harold died, the house stayed mine. I spent every summer there until my knees said no more stairs. Then I rented it to quiet families who sent me Christmas cards and jars of beach plum jam. The rent went into an account they never asked about. Children stop asking when they think there is nothing left to find. I noticed the change the way you notice frost on the inside of a window. Slow. One morning it is not there. The next morning it is. Thomas and his wife, Diane, began visiting on Sundays with folders instead of casseroles. They sat at my kitchen table and spoke of simplifying things for me. Diane's manicured hand kept touching the wood like she was already measuring for new curtains. I poured tea. I listened. I said very little. Old women learn that silence makes people nervous. They fill it with truth they never meant to tell. One Tuesday in March, I went to the doctor for blood pressure pills. I was gone 3 hours. When I came home, my desk drawer was open just enough for a finger to slip through. The folder marked Beach House, Original Documents was not where I left it. I stood in the cold study and felt the air move differently. Someone had been breathing in my papers. That night I sat in the dark living room and waited. At 11:30 I heard Thomas's key in the back door, soft, like he was still 12 and sneaking in after curfew. I did not turn on the light. I simply said his name. He froze in the doorway. Moonlight cut across his face and made him look 40 again instead of 52. "Mom," he whispered, "I thought you were asleep." I asked what he was looking for. He said taxes. He said he was helping. His voice shook the way it used to when he lied about broken windows. I told him the taxes were filed. I told him good night. I listened to his car leave quieter than it came. The next week the lock on my file cabinet was scratched. The week after that, my notary stamp was not where I kept it in the sugar tin. I began moving things at night. One photograph album to the linen closet. One folder to the bottom of the sewing basket. The deed and the trust papers I put in a waterproof pouch inside the old flour canister on the top shelf. My mother taught me never to keep all the flour in one jar. Diane started calling me sweetie. She said it the way people speak to dogs they are about to take to the pound. I smiled and let her. In 1989 a quiet man from the bank in Wilmington came to see me. He wore a gray suit and spoke softly, the way men do when they are talking about money that is not theirs. He said a lady should never keep everything in one country, especially a widow. He helped me open an account in the Cayman Islands. Just a small one at first. The rent from the beach house went there every month. Then the dividends from the railroad stocks my father left me. Then the settlement when the school district finally paid for my bad hip. I never told Harold. I never told the children. It was not secrecy for its own sake. It was breathing room. A place where no one could say, "Let me handle that for you, Margaret." The trust that owned the beach house was registered in the Caymans too. My name was the only name on it, but the mailing address was a law firm in Road Town. Every year they sent me a thin blue envelope with the balance. I kept those envelopes in the lining of my winter coat, stitched inside the hem where curious fingers would never wander. By the time Thomas and Diane started measuring my life with their eyes, the balance had grown to a number that would have made Harold sit down hard on the kitchen chair. 7 figures and some change. Enough to buy the entire street I lived on twice over. I knew the day would come when they found the house on the tax records. I simply did not know it would come so soon, or so cruelly. One April morning Diane drove me to the grocery. She insisted. Said my car made a funny noise. While we were gone, Thomas brought a locksmith to my house. I learned this later from Mrs. Alvarez next door, who watches everything from behind her lace curtains. They found the original deed in my flour canister. They photographed it. They put it back exactly as they found it, but the corner was creased in a way it had never been creased before. That night I took the blue envelopes from my coat hem and laid them on the kitchen table under the lamplight. I looked at the most recent balance and felt the house breathe around me, steady and old and mine. I was 78 years old. My hands had begun to shake when I poured tea. But they did not shake when I dialed the number written in pencil on the back of the oldest envelope. The lawyer in Road Town answered on the second ring. He still called me Mrs. Dawson, the way he driving had the first day we spoke. I told him it was time to wake the trust up. He said, "Yes, ma'am," the way men say it when they have been waiting years for permission. They waited until the lilacs were in bloom. I remember because the scent came through the open kitchen window the day they finally sat me down. Thomas pulled a dining room chair out for me the way men do when they think you are too frail to do it yourself. Diane stood behind him holding a manila folder like a hymnal. They had prepared a little speech. I could almost hear them practicing it in the car. The beach house was too much upkeep. Property taxes had gone up. Repairs were endless. They had found a buyer, a doctor from Raleigh who wanted to turn it into a wedding venue. He offered $950,000. After realtor fees and a few back taxes they had generously paid on my behalf, the net was $500,000. They were giving me 10%. $50,000. Take it or leave it. Thomas slid the check across the oilcloth. Green and crisp. My name typed in careful letters. Diane added the part they thought would comfort me. "You'll never have to worry about that old place again, Mom. We're simplifying everything for you." I looked at the check for a long time. Long enough for the silence to grow teeth. I picked it up between 2 fingers, the way you pick up something you are not sure is clean. I turned it over. I saw Thomas's signature as the executor of my estate. A title he had given himself with a power of attorney I never signed. Diane's lips kept moving, soft words about assisted living, about how nice the new place in Wilmington was, about how I would have my own little balcony. I folded the check once, then again, and slipped it inside my brassiere, right against my heart the way my mother used to keep bus tokens during the war. "Thank you, children," I said. My voice sounded like someone else's, thin and sweet and very, very old. "You've been so thoughtful." Diane smiled the smile of a woman who has finally won. Thomas exhaled like a man who has carried something heavy up a long flight of stairs. I asked if they would like a cup of tea before they left. They said they had to meet the realtor. They kissed the air beside my cheeks and promised to call tomorrow. When the screen door slapped shut behind them, I stood in the kitchen a long time listening to the lilacs brushing the side of the house. Then I went to the telephone on the wall, the old black one with the curly cord, and dialed the number I now knew by heart. The lawyer in Road Town answered with the same calm voice. I told him the house had been sold without my consent. I told him the exact date on the forged power of attorney. I told him to begin. He said, "Consider it done, Mrs. Dawson." I hung up and made myself a cup of tea with 2 sugars, the way I stopped taking it when Harold was alive. I drank it slowly at the table and watched the afternoon light move across the floorboards the way the ocean used to move across the porch at high tide. 3 weeks later, on a Thursday that smelled of rain coming, Thomas called. His voice was tight, the way it used to be when he was small and knew he had broken something precious. "Mom, have you seen the mail? There's a letter from some law firm in the Caribbean. They say the beach house closing can't happen. Something about the trust owning it outright. They froze the sale." I was shelling peas on the back step. I let the silence stretch until I heard him breathing hard. "I don't understand," he said. "You always said the house was in your name." "Just your name." I dropped another pea into the bowl. It made a small, satisfying sound. "It is in my name, Thomas. The trust's name is Margaret Elaine Dawson Irrevocable Trust. I set it up the year your sister would have turned 18. You were busy with college. I didn't want to bother you." Diane came on the line then, her voice sharp as broken glass. "This is fraud. We have a signed power of attorney. We have a contract." I kept shelling peas. The shells fell into the grass like green rain. "You have a piece of paper with my name on it," I said. "Forged on the 3rd Tuesday in March while I was at the doctor. Mrs. Alvarez next door has a very good view of the street. She wrote down the license plate of the notary you brought." The line went very quiet. I could almost hear Diane's heartbeat through the phone. Thomas tried again, softer. "Mom, we only did what we thought was best." I looked out at the yard where Ruthie used to chase butterflies. "I know what you thought, darling. That's why I waited. I told them I would be at the beach house on Saturday morning. Alone. I told them to bring the keys they had copied and meet me on the porch at 10. I told them to bring coffee, because I no longer had a pot there." Then I hung up before they could answer. That evening I packed one small suitcase. A cotton dress the color of seafoam. My mother's pearls. The blue envelopes from the Caymans. I laid my good black shoes by the door and slept better than I had in years. Saturday came in soft and gray, the kind of morning the ocean keeps for itself. I took the early bus so I would be there before them. The driver helped me down the step with my little suitcase, the way men still do when they see white hair and a slow walk. The house looked smaller than memory, but it smelled exactly the same, salt, old pine, sun on dusty curtains. I walked through every room touching the walls the way you touch a horse's neck to calm it. The kitchen window still stuck. The 3rd porch step still sang its familiar creak. I made myself a cup of instant coffee with water boiled on the ancient stove and carried it outside. I sat in the rocker that faced the water and waited. They arrived at 10:17 in Diane's silver SUV. Thomas carried a cardboard tray with 3 paper cups. Diane carried the manila folder like a shield. They stopped at the bottom of the steps when they saw me already rocking, calm as tide. I did not stand up. I simply said, "Come sit. The air is good for sorrow." Thomas climbed the steps first. His shoulders were rounded now, like a man carrying something heavier than folders. Diane tried to speak right away, something about lawyers and lawsuits and how this was elder abuse. I lifted one hand, gentle, the way my mother used to quiet a room full of children. "Drink your coffee first," I said. "It's a long drive back." They sat on the old wicker sofa that sagged in the middle. The cushions sighed under them. I reached into my cardigan pocket and took out the top blue envelope. I laid it on the table between us. Thomas stared at it like it might bite. I opened it slowly, the way you open a letter you have waited 30 years to read aloud. Inside was a single sheet. Current balance of the Margaret Elaine Dawson Irrevocable Trust. As of yesterday. The number had 8 figures now. Quiet, round, impossible to argue with. Diane made a small sound, half laugh, half choke. I let them look a long time. Then I took out a second sheet, this one from the law firm in Road Town. It stated, in careful English, that any attempt to transfer, sell, or encumber the property held in the trust without my written consent, notarized in person on the island, was null and void from the moment of signing. It further stated that the buyer's deposit of $950,000 had been returned this morning, minus wiring fees. I folded both papers and placed them back in the envelope. The house was never for sale, I said. It was only waiting. Thomas's coffee trembled in his hand. Diane's face had gone the color of the fog rolling in. I reached over and took the third cup from the tray, the one they had brought for me. I sipped it slowly. It was exactly the way I used to take it, 2 sugars, a little milk. I looked at my son. Really looked. His hair had gone thin at the temples. There were lines around his eyes I had never noticed. I am not angry, I said. Anger is loud. What I feel is quieter. Diane started to cry then, small, angry tears that did not know where to land. Thomas put his head in his hands. The gulls wheeled overhead while we sat in that heavy silence. 3 paper cups cooled between us. The ocean kept its own steady breathing behind the dunes. Diane tried to speak twice. Both times the words caught in her throat like fishhooks. Finally she managed a whisper. What happens now, Mom? I rocked once, twice. The chair knew my weight the way the sea knows the moon. Now? I said. Now you drive home. You tell your children their grandmother is not moving into the assisted living with the tiny balcony. You tear up the brochures. And you learn to knock before you enter a room that still belongs to someone else. Thomas lifted his head. His eyes were red. Mom, the money we spent, the realtor, the lawyer fees. I looked at him the way you look at a child who has broken his last toy and only now understands it cannot be mended. That is between you and the Lord, I said. I have already paid for everything that is mine. Diane stood up so fast the wicker sofa groaned. She walked to the railing and stared at the water as though it might give her back the years she had spent planning my small future. I reached into my pocket again and drew out the $50,000 check they had given me. I had carried it folded against my heart for 3 weeks. It was soft now, almost cloth. I held it out to Thomas. He would not take it. I placed it on the table beside the cold coffee. That is yours, I said. Seed money, perhaps, for the apology you will need to grow. Diane turned. Her mascara had made soft gray rivers down her cheeks. You could have told us, she said. All these years you let us think. I finished the sentence for her. That an old woman had nothing left but memories and a leaky roof? Yes. I let you think that. It was kinder than the truth you were not ready to hear. Thomas began to cry then, quiet, the way men cry when they are too old for noise. He pressed his knuckles to his mouth like he could hold the sound inside. I let him cry. Mothers know when tears need room. They left before noon. The silver SUV backed down the sandy drive slower than it had come. I watched until the dust settled and the gulls took the sky again. I stayed another week. I opened every window so the house could breathe itself clean. I slept in the small back bedroom where Ruthie used to watch storms roll in. I walked the beach at dawn and let the cold water numb my ankles. One morning I telephoned the law firm in Road Town. I asked them to change the successor trustee from Thomas to the local library foundation. I asked them to set aside enough each year for a scholarship in Ruthie's name. The rest would stay where it was, growing quietly, the way secrets do when they are treated with respect. When I locked the door for the last time that summer, I left the key under the same chipped flower pot it had always lived under. The house knew I would be back. On the bus ride home I watched the marshes slide past the window and felt something loosen inside my chest, something that had been knotted since the day they slid that check across my table. Old women are not invisible. We only become very good at choosing when we are seen. Some evenings now I sit on my own porch, the one in town with the creaking swing and the hydrangeas that refuse to die. I drink tea weak and sweet. I watch the streetlights come on one by one. Thomas has begun writing letters. Real letters on paper. He tells me about his garden, about the tomatoes that finally grew straight. Diane has stopped calling me sweetie. She signs her name plain now, the way a woman does when she has remembered respect. The beach house still sends its quiet rent every month. The balance in the Caymans still grows, patient and untouched, like a tide that never needs to prove how strong it is. People in town say I was clever. They say I taught my children a lesson. They are only half right. I did not teach them a lesson. I simply stopped pretending to be smaller than I am. The last laugh is never loud. It sounds like a screen door closing gently on an empty house that is waiting, patient and paid for the day its real owner decides to come home. It sounds like a rocker moving slow on a porch no one dared to take. It sounds like an old woman pouring herself another cup of tea, adding 2 sugars without asking permission, and smiling at the moonlight on her own quiet water. If this story settled somewhere soft inside your chest, stay with me a while longer. There are many more cups, many more evenings, many more truths only us aunties still remember how to tell. The lamp is low. The chair beside me is empty. Come sit. You are safe here.